spring sports. So.
Baseball?
We got baseball, track, and football.
Okay, we're going to begin now.
That's a lot of fun.
Bob, tell me when we're ready.
Good.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Suny Erie Board of Trustees meeting this Thursday, March 31st of 2022. I am Denise Wilson, your board chair. Today we will have, like previous meetings, some rearrangements to the agenda. We are waiting for another trustee to come before I call roll. And but in the interest of time, we will move to item 2, presentation of Suny Erie's audit by our friends from Drescher and Malecki.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Can you guys hear me good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, should I share my screen or?
Please do.
Please,
Yeah.
Charles.
Perfect. Does everyone see this?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, so my name is Charles Trottier. I was the senior manager on the audit this year. The partner on the audit is Carl Windmer. Unfortunately, he called me this morning with a stomach bug, and he hasn't been able to get out of bed. So we presented this same presentation here. It's dated March 24th. We presented it last year to the audit committee in more detail, so I'll try to summarize it, but please feel free to interrupt if you have any questions as we go through it. So essentially, what we're going to be delivering and what's in draft form and what was presented to the audit committee last week was the draft financial statements, the draft management letter, the auditor's communication letter, and there hasn't been any changes since, so we can move forward and present it to you guys here. And then just as an FYI, these have also been sent to Erie County for their formal review. So we'll be ready to issue after this meeting if you guys don't have any more questions, and assuming Erie County gets back, and I'll follow up with them if your group here is okay to move forward to issue these statements. But part of our deliverables every year is to issue financial statements, and this year the financial statement contains 3 different opinions. It's a big document of about 80-90 pages, but 3 opinions are our responsibility. The rest of the document comes from information of Suny Erie. The very first opinion is the opinion on the financial statements, what we're really hired to give, that they can be relied upon. We act as the third party, kind of a stamp of approval that we ran some tests and that the numbers that are presented in the financial statements fairly present the operation of the college. And so we did issue an unmodified opinion this year, or we're planning to move forward with an unmodified opinion, which means that it's free of any potential discrepancies. So it's a clean audit. The second opinion that's our responsibility is located further in the back of the financial statements. It is an opinion on internal controls, that they've been evaluated and that the numbers that go in the system produce good numbers that come out of the system and then go in the financial statements. So there is no material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we identified that would be included in your opinion. So once again, the internal control side of it is also a clean opinion for that government auditing standards report. And then the very last opinion that's also at the back of the financial statements that we're required to audit and opine on is the compliance with the uniform guidance. Uniform guidance is a single audit of your federal awards. So in that instance, we act as kind of a liaison with the federal government, where we act as auditors for a compliance audit with the federal money that you spend. Every year, typically we audit Pell Grants because of its significance and large dollar amounts. This year, because of the CARES and ARPA on the higher education emergency relief funds, that was the program tested. So for the first year, and as long as I've been with the college for 5-6 years, Pell was not tested as a single audit for compliance purposes, but rather your HEERF CARES and ARPA funds. there was no compliance deficiencies on the use of those funds as well. We looked at the lost revenues, we looked at the unreimbursed spending, the institutional portion, and the student portion, and everything was in compliance in accordance with the federal guidelines. So on the next slide here, auditor communication letter, we go into more detail there. Those are the required communications that we have to have every year with the audit committee overseeing the audit. So we went into more detail last week, but essentially what our responsibility under generally accepted auditing standards is to provide an opinion that the numbers that are in the statements fairly present the operation. They can be relied upon by the trustees, you guys, by the county, by financial institutions, bonding agencies, rating agencies, etc. So we run a series of tests. We use samples, so we provide a reasonable assurance, not absolute. We can't be in there and test every single transaction, but the numbers can be relied upon. They're reasonably stated. Significant accounting policies, those are included in note 1 to your financial statements. I won't go into any detail here. There hasn't been any change to communicate with previous years. Significant accounting estimates, that's another required piece of communication. Essentially, estimates are oftentimes harder to test as far as auditors are concerned, so we have to rely on assumptions, historical data that's used to test those assumptions that go in those estimates. A lot of them are derived from actuarial estimates, whether they're your legacy costs related to your net pension liability or your other post-employment benefits. So we disclose them there, but once again, they're consistent with prior years, so there's nothing really to disclose there. Independence, just as a formal communication, myself, Carl, the partner, everyone on the audit, and everyone in the firm is actually independent in fact and appearance to perform an audit that can be relied on by outsiders. And then other matters, there's nothing to communicate here as well. Other matters, if there were to be any limitation of scope, if we were to ask for a certain report, it wasn't provided to us, or a certain invoice and it wasn't provided to us, we'd be required to disclose it there. But that did not happen. We received full and open access to all records, and it was once again a pleasure working with the finance team there.
Could you
On the
do
next
me a
slide.
favor? I'm
Yes.
sorry. Enlarge your presentation a little. Thank you. Oh.
Is this good?
Yes, that's good. That's better. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that.
No, it's no.
Next slide here, we go into the financial highlights of the college over the last 5 years. We'd like to show a 5-year trend, expecting that there's always going to be ups and downs. So what we want to focus on here, there's 4 different line graphs, or 4 different lines in the graphs. The red line is your expenses as presented in the financial statements. The blue line, which you see more clearly in the last 2 years because it's not double, is your revenues. So that strictly takes the numbers from the financial statement. So the red line is your expenses, your blue line is your revenues. So over the last 5 years, you've seen your expenses come over your revenues, and the gap has varied. The largest gap being in 2020, which was $139.4 million at the top of that red line, while as your expenses and your revenues were $117.8 million in 2020, which was last year presented about $22 million loss in revenues compared to your expenses. But keep in mind that takes into account your long-term legacy costs that I talked about earlier, your other post-employment benefits, your net pension liability. So any change in employee benefits that are determined by an actuary are reflected in there that you have no control over. They're not included in your annual budgets. So for that purpose, we included another line, the kind of the dotted yellow line. It's your expenses, but it removes the non-cash items. So that other post-employment benefits and that net pension liability adjustments. So as you can see, your expenses are still a little higher than your revenues over the last 5 years, with ups and downs. In 17, you had more revenues than that dotted line. And then in 2021, this year, you basically broke even the actual loss this year in operation was $800,000, which is that dotted yellow line over that that blue line for your revenues. So also included in this document is, or one of the lines here is the dotted orange line that goes at the far that's at the bottom there under the blue line. That essentially takes your revenues, which is why from 2017 to 2018 the blue line and the orange line are on top of one another. But then in 2020 and 2021 we wanted to add a picture of what revenues would have been if CARES Act and American Rescue Plan wasn't recognized as part of aid this year. So had that not happened, in 2021, your revenues would have been $106 million compared to your expenses of $117 million. So there would have been a roughly $11 million loss compared to just an $800,000 decrease. And so some of the big changes that happened, obviously the red line, your total expenses were $139 million in 2020 compared to $116 million in 2021. That $24 million decrease is strictly mostly the result of your other post-employment benefits and your net pension liability. So that's a liability that's actuarially determined by a third party that comes in and does a whole series of tests around all your census data and how much future payment towards employee benefits you're going to be, and your retirees you're going to be required to pay over the next 30 plus years. And it evaluates a whole series of assumptions. And so that estimate decreased in 2021 compared to a pretty significant increase in 2020. So the gap between that expense was the major driver of expenses going down in 2021. As you can see, let's focus on the yellow dotted line, your actual operational expense that removes non-cash items. That decreased $11.4 million. That $11.4 million was mostly budgeted as planned in the 2021 budget, which saw a decrease in salaries of about 9%, or $7 million, and revenues stayed pretty consistent from the prior year, which saw increase in obviously in federal aid, which was decreased partially by tuition. Any questions on that slide? So some of the highlights that I touched on, just to have it in writing here. Operating revenues, just strictly operation here, saw an increase of $7.7 million from the prior year. Federal grants and contracts increased by $9 million, and that's directly the result of the higher education. And net tuition and fees decreased by $800 million, but that also takes into account the scholarship allowances that increase. So net tuition went down $5 million or so, but scholarship allowances went up, which by $4 million, which made a net decrease of $800,000. Non-operating revenues and county contributions, overall decrease of $8.5 million from the prior year. The main driver there was some of the Pell Grants, the federal aid from the prior year decreased $8.1 million, but it was essentially reallocated through your higher education emergency relief funds. On the operating expenses side, there was an overall decrease of $23.6 million from the prior year. That was that big drop in that red line in that bar graph, or that line graph. Of those, salaries and wages decreased $6.4 million. Like I said, that's about 9% of the budget, or that's about 9% decrease from the prior year, which was, when I looked at the budget, pretty consistent with what's planned. Employee benefits decreased $14.1 million. That's that's a big number there, but it truly represents the large increase that happened in 2020 in expenses driven by this this liability that used a discount rate that happened across all municipalities and colleges across New York State. So because of the market and the actuarially determined liability, employee benefits last year spiked up. So this year it came back down to a more reliable number or a more consistent number with previous years. But that's the reason for the decrease in employee benefits. Scholarship expenses decreased $600,000, and supplies, services in general, so your other more controllable cost, your operational cost decreased $2.3 million from the prior year. So one slide that we've been including too in the last couple of years is the cash position of the college over the last 5 years to show how the impact of revenues and expenses have had on the cash. As you can see, consistent with enrollment trends over the last several years, cash has gone down from 2017 to 2018 to 2019, and in 2020 we saw almost a 40% cut there from $31 million to $19.3 million with COVID being declared. And then in 2021, with the help of this federal aid, cash position has gone up a little bit. So it'll be important to keep track of this cash, which has been trending in line with enrollment in the past. So this final slide here is not an audited number per se, which we include the term unaudited there, but it comes from the annual report that the college files with New York State. The top number there, unrestricted net position, that comes directly from the financial statements. That number is audited, but it removes the impacts of those long-term liabilities, long-term legacy costs that aren't due in the current and don't fully represent the operation of the college. So once we remove the impacts of the other post-employment benefits, which is GASB 75, and the net pension liability, which is GASB 68, you get to an unrestricted fund balance amount. That's the unrestricted fund balance that's sent to New York State as part of the annual report. And I believe that's also the fund balance that's to be compared to when thinking about the college's fund balance policy, which strives to obtain 2 months worth of operating expenses, minimum of 2 months worth of operating expenses, or about 16.67%. At this rate, this $8 million of current unrestricted fund balance is about 7% of current expenses. So that's something to keep in mind. And although it has increased by $1.7 million from 2020, part of the next slide there is going to be our observation, but part of our management letter this year, similar to previous years, we like to include declining trends of cash and enrollment and show the impact of where the college stands financially. We also added a picture of what would it be without the federal aid, the relief funds that were received this year. So it'll be important to keep track moving forward and keep this fund balance and this fund balance policy in mind and how to address it to get back to the levels desired. So then on this observation, our very last slide here, just observations, as I mentioned, we did not have any significant deficiencies or material weakness to report on in the actual financial statements, but we do plan on moving forward with the management letter. It's in draft form. We're still accepting any comments that the audit committee, the board, or finance may have on them. Nothing's final yet. But there's 3 comments that we include in there. One is for discussing fund balance, planning and replenishment, and the declining enrollment trends. The other one is, the other two are actually more policy related, just for best practices for the college to adopt formal policies for bank reconciliations. Although the bank reconciliations all reconciled and they were all performed by the time the audit was completed, they were a little delayed in the timing of the later ones in the year. But it didn't impact our test, just to develop more of a formal policy to when to perform them, who's performing them, who's reviewing, and when sign-offs are to occur. Another one on termination policy, we do a termination testing every year to see that employees that are terminated or retire are properly removed from the payroll system in a timely manner. We identified two that took a little longer than usual to be removed from the system. So we're looking into those with the college, but just a policy on the process to do that. And then the declining trends in fund balance replenishment. Although we're hired to perform an audit and the audit generated a $1.2 million loss in total, accounting for all your long-term items this year, although that position, including all your long-term items, had a $1.2 million increase in that position this year, considering the impact of removing the long-term items and considering the impacts of this ARPA aid and the CARES Act that we fully anticipate will not be there in the future, or will start dwindling down in the next few years. It'll be important to just, once again, just keep in mind your fund balance policy. So we have a comment right now that's designed that talks about, it's kind of formatted in a way where the first paragraph is, okay, there's been decrease in enrollment in colleges across the state. Specifically, there's been some decrease in enrollment figures that we've obtained in census from the college here. That decrease before COVID had caused the college to appropriate fund balance in the budget. Now that fund balance is no longer available as much as it used to be. So what's the plan to help this enrollment decline? And then we discussed the short-term relief of what CARES Act has done and the American Rescue Plan has done, which led to an increase in that position this year, but it's not an increase that can necessarily be relied on. So although that's not audited, it's not part of our audit, it's definitely something to keep in mind as the board in making decisions for the future. So in general, just as figures that we've obtained from management, in 1920, the college recognized $4.6 million in federal relief funds. That's last year. Had those funds not been received, the total operational loss would have been $13 million. And in 2021, so this year's under audit, the college recognized $10.8 million in federal relief funds. Had that not been received, the total operational loss would have been another $9 million. So at some point, there's just going to have to be some reconciling to ensure that once those funds dry up, that there's other plans in place. So that's really that's it for the formal presentation here. I'm happy to answer any questions. Once again, I'm available for any questions now or through email. I know Bill has our email, Arda has our email, and whether myself or Carl are always available for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions
from any trustees?
trustees? I know that two of the three items are concerning policies that we have to address. Those policies are more administrative and do not come necessarily up to the policy committee, which is fine. However, I'm wondering if there is a way someone can check in with us to let us know those have been created.
Yes, we actually had a board policy approved for the bank recs.
Okay.
And as Charles said, during the course of the audit, everything was up to date. So we've addressed that. Yesterday, we reached out to our payroll person, George DeRosa, to get the details through Drescher Malecki, and the employees in question on the termination were part-time. And I think the disconnect is the department knew they left, but the paperwork never made it to HR on a timely basis. So we have to figure out how to make sure that's streamlined and the paperwork hits HR when the employee actually leaves. But they were both part-time employees.
Okay.
So we're addressing that. You know, if I could be, you know, what was said by Charles, I think it's incumbent upon us to echo it, because our budget that's not been audited, the budget that we're in right now, is relying on more one-time revenues. So for the 3-year period, 1920, the year just audited, as well as the current year, we'll be in receipt of over $28 million of federal stimulus, one-time funds. Without the federal stimulus, we're looking at a fund balance not of $8 million positive, $20 million negative. I would say this college is not in business if we have a $20 million negative fund balance. So just puts into perspective, we've been relying on these one-time. Yes, we've made cuts, but we have to make more cuts because the enrollment growth is not there to sustain our operations at this point in time.
Charles, thank you. I would only add that at the Budget Audit and Human Resources Committee a week ago, we did have a very robust discussion of all of this, of the report. Carl was there as well. Give our best to him, please. And we spent at least an hour or more going over everything that was just reported and more in greater detail. So, Bill, that was a important summary. Charles, thank you. I am glad that we have the Budget and Audit Committee meeting independently to drill down deeply into what's being reported here. So I would say that what we're looking at here is kind of a summary at the Board of Trustees and public meeting level, but we're working offline on this as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Charles.
Thanks, everyone, for your time.
And can I give a special shout out to Arda? Because without Arda, this audit does not get taken care of. I mean, she worked countless hours, and through this whole Workday transition and sometimes Workday mess, she has persevered. And again, without Arda, this audit would not have been a clean audit.
Well,
Thank you, likewise.
Thank you.
Yeah, I also wanted to thank Arda and Bill, because frankly, Bill has been critical to us being able to sift through exactly where we are and what we have to do moving forward. So thank you very much.
She's the brains behind
Keep going, Arda.
Get in there. Nice team effort.
And all
Help yourself to
three,
the coffee.
Arda, Dave, and Bill were all present at the Budget Audit and Human Resources, and were an important part of that discussion that we had in greater depth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is also actually a great lead into our next presentation that we will have regarding our Suny Erie Strategic Realignment Study. Ms. Katie Hagan from the RPK group. Oh, and Rick there as well.
Yeah, can you all hear me okay?
Yes. And has Rick been introduced?
Thanks. Hello, everyone. Rick Stanislaw, founder, senior partner with RPK Group. Pleasure to be here this morning, and looking forward to having Katie, who is our project lead, share our findings today.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. As was mentioned, my name is Katie Hagan. I'm a senior associate with RPK Group, and I have been leading this project with lots of other really wonderful people at Suny Erie and at RPK. So hopefully you can see this presentation okay. Thumbs up, Rick, if you can see it okay. Yes? Okay, wonderful. All right, so you've received this, I think, in advance, but if not, we'll be sure that you all get it after our conversation today. So I'm going to just talk a little bit about RPK Group in general, just to give you a little bit of background on our firm, and then I'll talk about the project and the goals of the project, and then give you an update on where we are in the project, presenting some initial analysis of student credit hours and section sizes, and then we'll end with some emerging recommendations. if you have questions throughout, please do just interrupt and ask them. I want to make sure that this is very clear to everyone as we go through the data. So RPK Group has been around. We're in our 12th year now, so for a while. We work across the country and in some cases across the world with institutions across higher education, public, private, 2-year, 4-year, on projects very similar to what we're doing with you all, which is creating a plan for sustainability now that the context of higher education is starting to shift. So we do want to make sure we're always centering mission and student success in the designs that we're bringing forward. So we'll talk today about sort of what are the things that we're looking at when we look across Suny Erie. But we aim to create, through your academic portfolio and through your faculty and staffing mix, this nice intersection of mission, market, and margin. And the way that we talk about that is that from a mission perspective, it's both what is your mission as an institution, but it's also a realization of what you're good at. Where do you excel as an institution? What do you do really well in terms of student success? And then what is your market and how well are you meeting your market? Again, both from a labor market perspective, being a community college in the Erie County, but also from a student market perspective. Are you offering things that students are interested in and that they're excelling in? And then how do you do all of that sustainably? So again, following the audit report, I think this is really important to think about, given the enrollment patterns at Erie Community College and again, across the country. It's really important to understand how you're going to right-size the institution to meet this margin, this margin component of your portfolio. So our project together is to develop an ideal academic portfolio for the Suny Erie Community College that's responsive to both student and community needs. So again, reflecting that the institution is smaller now than it once was and probably will continue to be, at the current size into the future. How do you right size around that? And then with that, identifying opportunities for restructuring both academically and administratively to improve performance at a lower price point to really, as Bill noted, kind of identify ways to cover that current reliance on federal funding. So one of the things we have to do for this project is make a lot of different data sources talk to each other. Very, very technical term there, but we work across student information data, faculty data, staff data, and course data. And then we bring in some financial pieces as well. And we have to create a mapping for all of those things. And in addition, we have to create a mapping for the college itself. So Suny Erie is a complicated place in the fact that you have 3 campuses, and they all operate with different degrees of independence. And particularly that's true on the academic side, in that you have lots of different departments across the 3 campuses, and some of them are really well connected and working well together, but some of them operate more independently. And so if we want to talk about Suny Erie as an institution, we have to create some mapping so that we're able to speak to the institution as a whole and trends that are occurring at the institution, as well as what's happening at individual campus levels. So we've created this mapping, and again, the main unit of connection is going to be the department. And this is mainly background for the report that you'll receive next month, because we're going to go down into every single department at every single campus and be able to speak with confidence around student success, resource utilization, and productivity. And we'll be able to do that both at the department level and then from a student success side into the program level. And so this is just to help you understand how we get to that level of granularity, kind of given the organizational structure at Suny Erie is a little bit more dispersed than you'll see in the report that we give. So the way that we've created this mapping is you'll operate 4 divisions across the 3 campuses and your online offerings. You have 45 unduplicated departments, and I'll talk in a minute about where you do have duplication. You have 80 programs. Again, this is an unduplicated count, focusing here on degrees and certificates. You have 3 physical campuses and then obviously many off-site locations, but our analysis is really just focusing on your 3 core campuses. And then you obviously have online offerings as well, both programs and courses. So this is just an example of what this mapping ends up looking like. So the way that a student experiences SUNY Erie is really at this location level. A student kind of goes to one place and they are in a program or they're taking courses, and they're really place-based in their experience. But again, as an institution, you have this broader framework of your divisions, of your different departments that operate within those divisions, and your different programs that are attached to those departments. And then you have instances where you have sort of the same program but offered at different campuses. So this is an example of business administration. You have it at both, or you have it at all three campuses, as well as an online version of that offering. So you'll see again this mapping in our final report, so you can kind of, to the extent that it interests you, kind of drill into the ways in which we're starting to see that duplication emerge across the three campuses. Specifically, you have duplication in these areas. Again, this is really based on RPK's analysis and our framework for building the academic structure. But a lot of this is also reflected in your current academic staffing structure in terms of academic administration. So many of the things on this list have multiple department chairs, for example. And again, a lot of them operate with relative independence on their physical campus, even though they have a counterpart at another campus sort of teaching in similar programs and teaching similar courses. So get into the data analysis piece now. As I mentioned, we'll just be talking about student credit hours and section offerings. In our final report, you'll see some additional information related to faculty and then more headcount, enrollment, and student success. But at this stage, the main thing we want to focus on is what's happening from a teaching perspective in terms of credit hours and section offerings. We look at 4 years in this analysis, 2018 to 2021. And we do exclude a few things from this analysis, primarily because of the intentionality of these particular offerings. So advanced studies are your dual credit courses or your dual enrollment courses that are often taught at the high school level or at the physical high school. So we don't have as much information on those in terms of bringing them into the analysis, and also it's not something that the community college has complete control over. Similarly, we've removed cross-registered courses, honors program, independent study, internship, practicum, and everything that's taught at off-site locations. Again, we're really focusing here on city, north, and south, and then your online offerings. These account for a total of 73,000 student credit hours across the 4 years of analysis, which is about 8% of total student credit hours, and 2,600 sections, so 13% of your total sections, again, throughout all 4 years. But I wanted to just note that advanced studies makes up a not insignificant portion of that. So the first slide here is looking at the institution as a whole. So we see here that from 2018 to 2021, your student credit hours have declined significantly, 28% over this time period. And the number of sections that you offer, so that's the number of course sections that were offered, has only gone down 14%. So general best practice would be, as your population declines, as the demand for your courses at SUNY Erie from students starts to go down, that you appropriately take courses offline. You take the courses away. But that has not happened proportionally at SUNY Erie across these 4 years of analysis. And this box at the bottom of this blue bar kind of shows you that. So this is the number of student credit hours that are being delivered per section. And if you were proportionally adjusting, you would see this number stay the same. So 2019 to 2020 is a good example where the number is very similar, because you took, a proportionally number of sections offline as their student credit hours went down. But then obviously 2021, some of this is certainly pandemic impacted, but enrollment fell dramatically and courses did not adjust proportionally. We'll now look at the same trend by campus. We have city campus over here on the left. We have your internet offerings, your online courses in the center left. We have the North Campus on the center right, and then South Campus all the way to the right. We'll keep this order of campuses throughout as we start to look more deeply into the divisions next. But you can see that at each of the campuses, there was that same kind of student credit hour decline. and then a similar lack of adjustment of the number of sections offered, so that over time, each campus has experienced a degree of inefficiency. The only thing, or the kind of bright spot that we notice here, is your internet courses or your online activity really increasing over this time. However, the number of sections also increased greater than the number of student credit hours as a percentage. So your online offering increased credit hours by 5%, but the sections went up by 17%. We're drilling down now into the Business and Public Services Division. So each of the campuses in this area saw a double-digit decline in student credit hours per section. So at City, it went down by 10, North went down by 14, and South went down by 15. You stayed relatively flat in your online, but it still went down compared to 2018. In your engineering division, engineering and technology division, we see that there's a trend of increasing sections while student credit hours decline. We see that at both City and at North. So this is particularly, I would say, kind of troubling in the sense that while the demand for courses and the student credit hours has declined, it actually increased the number of sections at both, again, City campus and at the North campus. In the Health Sciences Division, this is the smallest division at Suny Erie. It has had the least volatility in terms of student credit hours and sections, so it's remained relatively flat over time across the 3 campuses. But again, it's a small area overall compared to the other divisions. And then the last division is your Liberal Arts and Science Division. This is the largest division at Suny Erie, and it has seen decreases in student credit hours per section at each location over the time period. Next, I want to just talk briefly about your class size distribution. So this is just kind of another way to understand what's happening in terms of your course offerings. So while you did, as an institution, remove some course sections over time, because it wasn't a proportional adjustment, you see this significant jump in how small some of your classes are. From about 26% of courses enrolling fewer than 10 students in 2020 to up to 35% of your courses in 2021. Again, certainly some of this could be a pandemic impact, but in general, that's a significant portion of courses enrolling fewer than 10 students. And then one other thing I'd like to point out here is that in terms of faculty equity from a workload perspective, this can often cause concern amongst faculty in terms of a lot of faculty teaching a lot fewer students relative to others. And you see this in some of the prior slides when you see the number of student credit hours that are being delivered per section. You're getting into enrollments of 2 and 3 and 4 students in some divisions versus 10 or more in others. So it's just something to, again, keep in mind moving forward that this does create some equity challenges amongst faculty.
Also, Katie, you had commented, I don't know if the board can read, but I believe you were talking about the fact that these percentages at the lower end don't include courses that are designed specifically for small class sizes, such as specific labs that require that. So they pulled those out. So the numbers would be even worse if we had included those, is the net now.
Yes, that's correct. We removed things that are to be really, really small. And then this next slide, it's our last data slide, is just speaking to the fact that since 2019, even though the campus has experienced this enrollment decline, there has not been an adjustment in physical space. So that no buildings have been taken offline. There hasn't been any kind of reflection physically to respond to this smaller student population. And this is just taken from your JMZ report, your space inventory that was done, and the inventory was done in 2019, but the report came out in 2021. So based on this initial analysis of your course data and your section information, we have a few emerging recommendations. So the first is that SUNY Erie should reorganize itself under a one college approach. As I mentioned previously, there's a lot of duplication that happens by having 3 campuses that can operate relatively independently from an academic perspective. It's creating duplicative structures, duplicative administration, and so there's a lot of opportunity to really streamline across your academic structure if you approach this as more of a one college mindset or one college model. It doesn't mean you have to have one campus, but just that the campuses are more closely aligned. And then with that, right-sizing your academic offerings to make sure that you're offering things that students are interested in and that the community needs, that your local labor market needs. This will likely result in us recommending some program elimination and some department elimination, just to more fully right-size to your current population. And then ideally embrace the area that you are experiencing some growth in, which is your online offerings. With that, we think there will be recommendations to remove some physical buildings and to, again, streamline your physical spaces because you don't have the demand for the amount of physical space that you currently have. And then in terms of the student experience, to move the student experience from very place-based campus experience to one where they have access to services in a way that's more on demand for them. So we call this sometimes the virtual front door, so that a student can access services and their services would be uniform in a virtual setting, in an online setting. They would still have access to sort of in-person services as needed, but they wouldn't need to have such a physical space connection to their services that they would receive. We plan to offer a final report in May. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to come back in a month or two and give you all of the more detailed recommendations. But again, those will include things around the academic restructure, the physical space utilization, and administrative staff realignment towards the one college model that I just talked about. I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions from the trustees regarding this report? I sit on the realignment advisory committee, so we were able to ask a lot of questions, I was able to ask questions during that committee meeting of this report. But one of my biggest takeaways from the work that RPK has done is that we have tremendous opportunity here to increase our efficiency of the college and also to connect our current course offerings to workforce needs. And I think this although it looks really gray, at times when we're talking about the financial position of our college and the steps that Dr. Vulcan and Bill and Adiam and the rest of the team may have to make, I think that this is a tremendous opportunity for us to just be a better institution overall. So I definitely look forward to the report, and I thank both of you, Katie and Brick, for the work that you've done thus far.
Katie, can I just ask a question? So obviously we have work to do with opportunities to pursue here in this realignment. Just an impression from your other studies that you've done at other campuses. How significant is our alignment problem compared to other schools you look at? I mean, maybe on an average. It's safe to say we're serious out of line here.
I would say that you all are on the a little bit more out of alignment than typical, I would say. I wouldn't say it's the furthest we've ever seen. We've certainly worked at places that have been a little bit worse, but it's not great. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, as Richard
Okay,
said.
we'll keep it there. Thank you.
I think that said, just to build on Katie's comments, and your own, this is, of course, an industry problem. This is a higher education problem. I think it's important to keep that in mind, that higher ed is just now sort of waking up and pursuing long-term solutions to what have been some long-standing challenges, right? And the way that you do it, the way that we all show good leadership, is by being willing to do the hard work to get it, to do this kind of analysis and move forward with the suggestions that emerge. So I think that's important context to keep in mind, and to recognize that there is significant opportunity here in terms of the institution moving towards a more sustainable.
So, Katie or Rick, could you comment specifically on the challenge that we have moving to a one college infrastructure? Because, you know, I recognize your point about everyone is experiencing declines in enrollment, but candidly, I've never seen a college that's had, you know, this level of duplicative infrastructure. And, you know, can you point to other colleges that you've worked with, or, you know, tell us in number how many you've seen have this?
I can't say from my personal experience that I've seen an institution that is a single institution that operates its campuses so independently.
And I would concur with that. It's certainly the case across systems or even other multi-campus institutions that we don't see those systems and institutions leverage themselves as much as they might, meaning there's more opportunity to optimize, to create efficiencies. That said, I would concur with Katie. Across my career, you have more duplication than we have probably ever seen.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Sure.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you, Katie and Rick, again. We look forward to your report in May.
Yep.
Our pleasure. Look forward to coming back, and thank you to all of you for being willing to partner with us. As you hold a mirror up to yourselves and really ensure that you're serving the students there. We look forward to coming back. Being
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
Okay. We have some important business to take care of. For instance, roll call. In the absence of Madam Secretary, I will be calling roll. Lynn Linehan.
Here.
Kate Masiello, absent. Candice Morrison.
Here.
Carrie Phillips.
Here.
Jeffrey Stone.
Here.
Denise Wilson is here. Travis Poling.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum. I would like to officially call the meeting to order. But before I move on, you may have just heard and see a new face around the table. I would like to personally welcome Ms. Candice Morrison to the board. This is her first meeting as a official Suny Erie Board of Trustee member. And she comes to us today as a partner from Crichton Johnson and Crow.
Creighton, Johnson, and Drew.
Okay.
Yeah, it's French.
If you would like to say a few words, you can. I don't want to put you on the spot, but I just wanted to make sure we welcomed you appropriately.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to serving. I took courses at actually this campus as a high school student, so walking in today was sort of a flashback to those days. So, I have deep connections to this institution through my family, and I'm just happy to be here and be in service.
Great. Well, we will be putting you to work quickly. Welcome.
Thank you.
So with that being said, yes?
Can I just make I thought this would be a good opportunity, and at the last meeting, we didn't have time, and it just occurred. I think we should acknowledge the passing of our past board chairman, Dennis Patrick Murphy,
Yes.
who
Thank you.
served as chairman of this body for 3 years, and was on the board for, I think, a full term of 7 years, but just was an incredible resource for this college. A successful entrepreneur in the hospitality industry, and somebody who went to this college whose brilliant career started here at this campus, is where we said. He was from Williamsville, and just thought we should maybe pause for a moment of silence in his memory
Absolutely.
and contributions to what he gave to this school.
Absolutely. Let's take a moment in honor of our former chair, Dennis Murphy. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Yes, Dennis was very influential. I remember, and I won't do this to you, Candice, but I remember him coming up to me and asking very early on into my tenure as a trustee, do you want to serve on this blue ribbon panel? And it was just like, what's going on, and what's happening? But he really taught me a lot during that time, and I appreciate all that he's given to this college.
He's a good example, Candice, as you go around town and introduce yourself as a Board of Trustees member here. I've been struck by how many times I've been in conversations with really successful people in all different walks of life around the community who started here.
Absolutely.
And he's a perfect example. You're an example. It's quite striking. And it's
Absolutely.
good for all of us to remember that and be in conversations about that as we make our way through our other worlds.
Thank you, Jeff. I would like to entertain a motion to go into executive session.
So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Perfect. We're asking that term President Bill Reuter sticks around for us. And deactivation of the 7-degree
Yeah.
program.
Yeah.
So those 3 items, we may need a little discussion, so I'm just
It's all
gonna,
enrollment based. I
Okay.
mean,
just a little summary. And Candice, it's normally not like this, and and I'll say this. Ready? I guess I need a motion to come out of executive session.
So moved.
Second.
Any opposed? Vice Chair Jeff Stone, would you please read the notes from executive session?
The executive session dealt with collective negotiations, Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, and matters leading to the appointment or employment of a particular person. No formal action was taken during executive session.
Thank you. We are in jeopardy of losing quorum, so please pardon me as I go through the adjustments to this agenda. The first thing I would like to ask for approval, a motion for approval, comes from the consent agenda. It's the BOT minutes of February 24th and the Committee of the Whole minutes of February 24th.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We also have for approval the Commencement 2022 executive summary. We are going live this year, so I'm actually very excited about that. That is one of my favorite parts of this role. May I have a motion
So moved.
for approval? Thank you, Trustee Linehan. May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Commencement 2022 executive summary has been approved. Just going through for board information. We'll go back to board information. Curriculum, student success and diversity. We had our first standalone meeting earlier this month. We are working on creating a standing agenda. We also had a detailed discussion about the CAO workforce renewal, which I'm very excited about the college partnership with this, continue in partnership and re-engagement with the CAO workforce. So may I have a motion for approval of the agreement CAO workforce renewal?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Also, we met Chair Stone, we're going to approve the HR agenda under your committee report, so.
Right, as I said, we had a good, robust budget, audit, and human resources meeting a week ago. Went deeply into the matters discussed when the financials were presented. And we do have one human resources agenda appointment, I believe, that we're going to be talking about and approving because of the level. And that is Professor Erickson, who's, I believe, online.
Yep. Erickson Naylands,
Erickson?
Dr. Naylands.
Okay, good.
Is actually, we interviewed for the Vice President of Enrollment Services a couple weeks ago. And I have to say, in my, I'll say many years of professional employment, I don't think I've ever had anyone provide as compelling presentation in an interview. The breadth of knowledge that he has, the understanding of our systems, Suny Erie, the trust that he's gained with people in Suny Erie, I think are uncompromised and unparalleled. And I strongly support moving Dr. Naylands to our Vice President of Enrollment Services. Confident that he has all the attributes we need to be successful moving forward and to help grow our enrollment quickly.
Thank you. Motion to
I move it.
okay, thank you.
Enthusiastically.
Enthusiastic. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Congratulations, Dr. Morrison.
Thank you. I'm truly humbled by those words. I'm also humbled by my fellow colleagues, the board, for their confidence in me in this position. I fully understand the gravity of the role, and I look forward to continuing to collaborate with all of my peers in this. So thank you very much for that vote of confidence, and look forward to working with everyone.
Thank you.
Absolutely. For the last items that need to be approved, and then I'll go back up to the agenda, we have under my report, we have bylaws, red line version, bylaws clean version, and also a bylaws waiver resolution. And I'm just looking.
Want me to do a quick overview?
Yes,
Madam
please.
Chair?
Thank you.
Yes, so last January of '21, the board at my urging went to a committee of the whole structure, and with Dr. Balkin coming back, the board wanted to go back to the individual committees outside the committee of the whole structure. So this red line version essentially goes back to our prior way of operating. It was identified as part of the bylaws, so I made the changes back. We did make another tweak of it in that we merged two separate subcommittees. We had the talent management committee, outside budget and audit, and the feeling from the president was hiring of staff is such an integral part of our financial outlook and future that it's incumbent upon more eyes on that process. So we combined and merged those two separate subcommittees into one, and Madam Chair and Vice Chair spoke about that our first meeting this past Thursday. So it's basically that's the only changes. And then the bylaws waiver, your current bylaws require basically for any proposed changes to the bylaws to sit for 30 days before you entertain moving forward. You mentioned it last month, and this will enact those changes, and we've already followed it. I put together a resolution basically waiving that 30-day requirement.
Perfect. May I have a motion to
I'll
approve
move it.
item 1, 2, 3?
I'll move those items.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Okay. Also, really quickly, while we have everyone here still, you have in front of you a Suny Erie Community College dignitary graduation attire form. I am told by my supervisor, Kelly, that we have to have these completed and filled out if you plan on attending graduation. So please fill this out and send this to and hand it to Kelly before you leave today.
I object to the weight question.
Right. Okay. With the minutes to spare. All right. Perfect.
If you can.
Now, if you don't mind, thank you for doing that this fast. I want to go back up now to items received outside of committee meetings. This is for the Suny Erie proposal. This is for board's information, but I would like Dr. Balkin and his team to elaborate a little bit on this. Suny Erie proposal Form 5 to deactivate 7 degree and certificate programs. LMHF financials ECC February 2022. LMHF financials ECC January to February 2022.
So I'll pass it over to our provost, Dr. Sugai.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My stuff, but as Chairwoman indicated, in terms of our the activation of 7 program, we worked with the faculty to ensure that we are doing a teach out of our students. In part of our rationality for deactivating is thank you so much, is an enrollment based, but not only, it's also about sustainability. And so due to that, we have planned out, like I said, a teach-out plan for our students that are in the program. We have talked to our students about it, and so we have that laid out for the students to be teached out. Again, I just want to emphasize deactivation means for us to revisit these programs to see if there's an opportunity to collaborate with other departments. So it doesn't mean that we are discontinuing at this point. So it gives the college an opportunity about 2 years or so to look to see what we need to do to consolidate and to really revisit those programs as they are.
But to be clear, people cannot enroll in those
Absolutely.
programs as they were defined.
And by teaching out, you mean those in the programs are
Correct.
allowed to continue through?
Correct. We have to not only offer the course offering, but we also have to ensure that we serve the students on the service side of the college. So nothing is being missed for those students, but clearly to Dr. Balkin's point, we're not admitting new students until further discussion about those programs.
Primarily an enrollment and historic enrollment decision-making process?
Yeah, I mean, we actually have a program that had one student enroll. I mean, and frankly, you know, I think it was, you know, a program that was started in the 90s, and like many of our programs, they need to rise to the occasion, and then we need to basically pare down and focus our portfolio on what's really in demand. And unfortunately, you know, these 7 just don't have the demand that we require.
And I think part of our job, and I think all of us heard from the RPK team, is to really look at our program offering and to make sure that those programs are sustainable, not only from an enrollment perspective, but the job market. Is that the way? And do we need to revisit our curriculum to make sure that we're meeting our students' need, the community, but also our industry partners? So more to come as the college goes through this. So this is our first initiative to deactivating of the programs.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions from around the table? Thank you, Dr. Scott.
Thank you.
Regarding the LMHF,
Yes, so we received this report after budget and audit, so it went right to the board. We are part of the Labor Management Health Fund. There's 12 entities, including Erie County, ECMC, and some municipalities, Water Authority. For the month of February, we generated $168,000 surplus. Year to date, we're at $443,000, and that's a 14.2% positive variance. And I think overall, the LMH fund generated a 5.4% surplus. So we are doing very well. As you are aware, we had no increase in our health insurance rates, which I don't think I've ever been able to say ever, and may never be able to say again, but because of the way we've worked, it's a labor management, so labor and management work together as part of this fund, and Maureen's on it, and Andy Sacco, and it's a good group, and we are very sensitive to our employee needs as well as what the rates are, so it's a positive trend.
thank you. Are there any questions regarding the financials that were in the packet? Thank you, Bill.
Thanks, Travis.
Thank you.
Thank you, Travis.
Hi, Travis.
See you, Trev.
Have a wonderful day.
Too.
Just going back through, I want to make sure I don't miss anything. Under the for board information, there's a few items regarding the budget and audit committee. Items 1 through 9.
Right, and we did go through these also at the meeting. I would say it probably would be appropriate here to take a look at the, the budget to actual and discuss that a little bit. And I think that was really it. We've got the 2, obviously, as of last August and then end of February. We did go over the stuff from Drescher and Malecki already, so we're in good shape there, and the rest is pretty minor. So
Would you like for us to pull it up, or?
I think if we can, otherwise we can. I have it in my materials.
Okay.
So so.
I think it's probably page 123 possibly, Bob.
121 and 123.
121 is August, 123 is, you want February, Jeff, or August?
I think the February is of interest, and it particularly ties to, usually we bring an enrollment discussion in at this point as well.
That is 123.
Thanks, that's February, that's what we're on. So this, just reduce it a little, Bob, if you look, so the top area is our revenues, and under that line, federal grants and contracts, we have budgeted $12.6 million for the current fiscal year in one-time revenues through the CARES and HERF. And if you took that out, we projected a $12 million deficit for 21-22. We are being very mindful of our spend, so we are controlling expenses. Our expenses compared to last year are down almost $5 million, a little over $5 million. So again, we are controlling expenses as best we can. We are trying to do anything we can as far as the revenue side, but we're mainly a function of enrollment. 80% of our revenues comes from enrollment, and enrollment for the fall was down compared to the prior year. Spring, we are sort of at the same level we were last spring, but we will see where we go for the summer. We have one more opportunity to hit our tuition revenue as well as our student fees, but we will have a budget surplus, but we will still have a functional deficit for the fiscal year ended August 31st, 2022. And Bob, I don't know, maybe we can segue. Jeff mentioned enrollment. Could you pull up the chart that Dr. Nealon's? No, there's an enrollment chart for spring semester, Jeff. I know the president usually covers it under his report, but maybe we can just segue quickly into that, and either Dr. Balkin or Eric could talk about it briefly.
Before we roll into enrollment, I just would draw everyone's attention back to this chart that we saw earlier in the meeting. This is basically a visual representation of what Bill was just reporting on. And it was very helpful at the budget meeting to understand exactly what each of these lines meant, what it meant to back out the OPEB and the pension liability, what the real deficit is, and so forth. And I think this is as good a representation as we could hope for in terms of just being able to, at a glance, understand where we are financially. And yes, the chart we just saw is good, but this was visually easier to grasp and quite accurate and quite helpful. So page 7 of our materials came from the accounting firm.
So, Eric, do you want to jump into enrollment, or would you like me to do it?
I'm happy to do so, Dr. Balkin. So for the board, what you see in front of you is our current enrollment for the spring 2022 semester. These numbers were ran through a CIRRUS report that we can generate in Workday. Much thanks to Kathy Colesto and her work in IRAP to be able to produce this report that we feel is as best of an accurate representation of our enrollment at this point in time. I have gotten into the habit of running these reports daily so that we can start to monitor more consistently with regards then to our enrollment numbers and looking at data trends whenever possible. You see at the high level overview here at the top that our current head count for this semester as of 3/29/22 is at 8,248 students. You can see that we are able to compare it to our last point in time comparison, which was 3/22/2021. So I do caution you when you see that plus 0.11%, I think as Bill highlighted, it is roughly then on par with where we were at this point in time last year. You will notice when you look down at the next line that our FTEs at 2,740 is a lower percent relative to that same point in time. You may ask why. We are seeing from my analysis of the data a increased activity, as you see down below, enrollment by campus, as well as our higher education history, our advanced studies population, which was also talked about by the audits at today's meeting, as well as from our PK group, that is a growing number in terms of our enrollment. The traditional FTE headcount by online, South, North, and City, as you can see at the enrollment by campus, is lower than where it was at the end of spring 2021. So I do want to caution that we are looking at end of term numbers here in the following two tables, and that's comparative to where we are right now at the 329.22 mark. So I'm happy to take questions about our current enrollment as it looks at by different categories as well as locations at this time.
I do have a technical question that's just a little bit bigger, so we could read some of the, I don't know if you can zoom in a little bit more. Thank you, that's perfect.
So we track our population by higher education, and so we look at our first time, full time, the number of students that transfer from another higher education institute. Our continuing returning is they were here last semester, they're coming back again, and then advanced studies, our high school population. So those numbers really show about 25% of our total population is students actually in high school. They're getting transcripted courses. Our goal is to recruit those 2,000 plus students that they become fully matriculated at ECC. That's the market share we have to go through. But the good sign is the 3 of the 4, we're seeing some positive trends. It's that continuing returning. So that speaks to persistence and retention efforts that we have to improve upon.
How have we done historically with that high school population, or is it too new to say?
Actually, it's been growing over the past several years. Suny gave us the ability to offer free tuition to any school district that has a free or reduced lunch program and or any individual that has free or reduced lunch program. Otherwise, we have to charge a 1/3 tuition rate.
This is while they're in the high school.
Yep, so we're able to offer all classes at Buffalo Public Schools, all classes at Lackawanna School.
Nice, yeah.
So there are school districts that meet that free and reduced lunch program. So that's been our focus on offering those courses again to try to get those students then to matriculate full-time to ECC.
And do we have any data on how many of them who start that way in high school actually do wind up here?
That is something that we're collecting as a college, and particularly when we went to that waiving the tuition, the charge for those students. So that is something that Dr. Nielsen will be looking with the advanced study department to see how many of those students are going to matriculate. And I think the other point with the advanced study is really leveraging our faculty, because we have lead faculty in those advanced study programs, and so they have the opportunity to go into the high schools more frequently where that's not necessarily allowed, as you know. So part of what we are going to do with Dr. Nielsen leadership is to really create that partnership so that our faculty are advocating and building that relationship with the staff, with the students, and with their parents. So that is our goal moving forward, to increase that opportunity.
And candidly, it's not just the faculty. I mean, we do have counselors, we have say yes people. We've got a lot of people in the high schools, and we have to step back and make sure we're leveraging them in the fullest manner possible. So, that's going to be a key consideration moving forward.
And at this point, just maybe a basic question, what is the financial arrangement with this? We don't get any money?
We
or
get a third FTE.
Third FTE?
Well, it's based upon credit hours. So we could have 30 students taking 1 credit, that's 1 FTE.
Okay.
So it could be 10 students taking 3. It's any number of credits, so an FTE is, we generate 150,000 credits, divide by 30, that's an FTE.
And if we're not charging the students tuition, where's the money coming from?
We're still getting state aid.
I see.
So we are still seeing some financial, and again, it's a recruitment activity for us.
Okay. So they're aiding them even though they're in high school. Okay.
Yes.
I have a question about the previous chart by campus. When we're looking at enrollment numbers, is there a comparison of enrollment numbers versus the capacity for each of those campuses? So in other words, capacity in terms of if there was full enrollment at those campuses, what would those numbers look like versus what's actually there?
That's a great question. Something I want to clarify when we look at this enrollment by campus, this is how the student has designated their home campus. It may not necessarily reflect activity that is then related to their courses. So for example, a student may have South Campus as their home campus location, and they would then count into this total here, but they may be then taking classes online. That analysis is something that RPK is more indicative of that report that you saw when looking at then those student credit hour ratios by each of the locations as to the activity of how students were taking those classes.
And that's why I think to just add to that whole idea of one college approach to the college will make sense, and particularly due to COVID. Our students are behaving a lot differently, and even just not us, but higher education is trying to figure out how is our students behaving in terms of the way they select their courses. So for us as a college to go with that one college approach is probably timely, because our students are just doing some online, some evening, some on campus versus, so it is something that we're looking at to see that trend in terms of impacting the one college approach.
But you might remember when RPK group showed us the credit hours per 100 square feet type of thing. Are you asking what's the optimum, maximum credit hours per square feet you could expect?
Yes.
Because that's actually benchmark data we should probably get from RPK group.
Candice, answering it a little differently, so our high point enrollment was 2010. We had 13,650 FTEs, 20,000 head count. We're down to 8,248, 2,000 of which are at high school. So our head count's down probably well over 50%.
Wow.
And since 2010, we've not taken any building offline, any campus offline. We added the new STEM building, and we added a nanotech annex. So we've added capacity whereby the usage has been reduced by 50% or more.
And to be clear, in 2010, the number of advanced studies was probably close to 0. So now we're at 2,000, not being taught on our campuses.
And furthermore, to support that activity data, when you saw the RPK group's analysis looking at the online activity growing, it's important to recognize that this is what's designated then by where the student has their home campus. And even though here it may be that you see the online, that doesn't necessarily reflect the way in which students are taking classes, and that's where the RPK analysis and course level activity will be important to consider as well.
Erickson, while you have the floor, could you maybe just jump to some of the recruitment activities, especially I think we hosted something yesterday on campus. Now that hopefully COVID's behind us, we're starting to see more activity.
That's correct. With guidance from Phil Struble, who's been extremely helpful with my transition into this, there was a North Campus hosting regional college fair yesterday and on Wednesday, and I had a chance to talk with Phil this morning with regards to activity there. There is roughly over 75 students that were able to specifically come here to the Erie, Suny Erie side of things, and talked with 75–80% of those students, as well as parents that were there. And so this ability to be able to make those connections and relationships with students right at the beginning is something that to me is paramount, I think, in this role and that we do at the institution. We're a part of the community. We want to make it so that right there from the beginning, we're building those important relationships with students. And I think that these types of activities, as well as others that we have planned, we have our open house that is going to be held at all 3 locations on April 27th. We have high school visits that are planned. We have the South Campus is hosting Tech Wars. We have summer activities that are planned. And so we are absolutely going to commit to engaging in these opportunities as much as possible to make those meaningful relationships right up front.
Dr. Nielsen, thank you for that. The other thing I want to talk about is the fairs that's happening and opening up around the city. I know in the past, ECC has had booths or tables at a lot of these, Greek festivals, Taste of Buffalo, things of that nature. The issue that I saw in attending these fairs is oftentimes there was a table with information, but no person, no bodies were there. So I'm wondering if that may be a potential way to engage community again as people are starting to come back outside. However, if we have the resources to have bodies there instead of just the tables with paper.
I appreciate that feedback and any feedback that we receive, and those will absolutely be taken into consideration as we really make sure that we make the best impact possible at any touch point with the students.
So we do have recruiters that are outward facing. They go out into the community.
Okay.
And you know, pardon?
Post them.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Okay.
And I should clarify, that event yesterday, that was the Western New York College Consortium, so thank you, Phil, for being able to clarify for me on that.
Thank you.
We also have an event planned for Juneteenth, so we are making sure that we are able to capitalize on this opportunity to talk with students as much as possible.
Thank you so much.
You know, candidly, moving forward, you know, we've touched on advanced studies. I think our greatest opportunity, even though the high school population may be shrinking nationally, we need a bigger piece of that pie. And frankly, especially in the city, we have just tremendous opportunity to grow both advanced studies and, you know, transfers to SUNY Erie. So I'm cautiously optimistic. And again, when I started in my previous position in Indiana, we had about the same size number of advanced study students, and we quadrupled it in 2.5 years.
Yeah.
So the potential is definitely there.
Yeah.
And that was with a smaller population.
Yeah, and from a parental side, my son took advanced study courses at SUNY Erie while in college, while in high school, and it just really cut our costs down some as when he went to college. So, I mean, that it just makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Erickson.
Welcome.
So, in Secretary Masiello's absence, we do see. I'm sorry, Jeff. Were you done with your?
Yeah, I think
okay.
so. That was fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're logging in, items 1 through 9 for board information. Under the policy and governance, we have the minutes for board information from January 5th, 2021. I believe policy met this week as well. Strategic planning and assessment, Chair Phillips.
So we met on March 22nd. It was my first meeting as the chair, and I think it was Dr. Balkin's first meeting as well. So we had a lot of background information that we went through. Dr. Sagai provided a lot of materials for us, and we were able to start planning how we're going to plan out our strategic plan and over what period of time it would require us in order to really come up with the kind of plan with the level of detail that we require. We had the meeting later in the month than we normally would, which is why we don't have any sort of presentation prepared today. The agenda was already full. But the reason why we did that was because there was a event on the college day on March 18th that we thought would be informative for our meeting on the 22nd. But going forward, our meeting will be planned earlier in the month so that we can have time to get onto the agenda and give more information to the board as to what we discussed. So our next meeting is going to be on April 12th at noon. We would then anticipate at the next board meeting preparing a presentation for everybody so that we can discuss the timeline of, our current deadline is August of 22 is what we're working off of, and it became pretty apparent that we're going to need some additional time in order to fully plan out our next strategic plan with the amount of work that needs to be done. And we have a great team assembled to do it, and we've got a good start. But we're gonna really need to dig into the work and plan out specific steps and goals and develop a timeline that we can really stick to.
Thank you.
So, yep, then I think I have the next one too.
Okay, go ahead.
We also had our technology meeting, which it seems like it was like months ago, Scott. I don't know. I had to check to make sure we even met between the last time because I was like, but it was February 28th. I double checked. We discussed our normal standing items. This was, again, I think this was the first meeting that Dr. Balkin met with us, so we talked a lot about the background. We focused in again on Workday. And our printing initiative, and I know Scott has some information. You can take Travis's spot, but I'll move over so you're closer to the mic.
Scott, you growing?
Not the right way.
Bill, you're shrinking.
Oh, I know that.
A lot of stuff.
Good morning. Yeah, so at the technology meeting, it's in February, we met on 4 topics. Usually we've been working mostly on Workday, but the first one was the Workday Project. So we did finish that implementation phase late last year, and sort of the last carryover from that was we had 1 integration left. So Workday did come out with a major release, the first one of the year, just 2 weeks ago. And we're testing through, and there's really no need for that last integration, so that sort of saved us a lot of money and time. So that wrapped up the complete implementation phase of Workday. So sort of in a steady state, stabilizing the system. And one of the pain points that we've had as financial aid was the last module that Workday released in their string of the student modules. So March 12th. That major release, they fixed 48 defects just in the financial aid modules. So what the team is doing now, both the financial aid office and ITS, is sort of working through all those cases just to verify that each one of those defects was resolved going forward. So some of those, post-production projects, they're not really set by ITS. We get input from all the functional departments or things coming down from Suny. So just some of the things that we're working on, there's over 100 in the list. But one is a global ID project pushed down by Suny. Right now, every single Suny college has a different ID for their students and their employees. They're different across all the campuses, so they're sort of creating one ID for every single Suny person. Makes it easier for reporting and these centralized systems. The first of those is the replacement of Blackboard. Most campuses use Blackboard for our distance learning environment. This summer, there's 30 Suny schools who are piloting Brightspace. We're one of those schools, so that's sort of a prerequisite for that huge implementation of moving off of Blackboard. By fall, we'll be completely on Brightspace. That is the plan. So that's one project.
Sorry, Scott.
Yep,
Are
go
they
ahead.
giving you full support behind the transition? We don't have to do any type of, okay.
Good one, right? That's a good one. No, Suny does have a large support model. We're having calls, 2 or 3 times a week with Suny, with Brightspace, and that is both on the academic side, Pat Ryan's team under Audium, and the ITS technical side. So there's lots of moving parts.
Okay.
They're also going to be providing training not only to the faculty and staff, but to the students. They're going to help with migrating course content over from Blackboard into the new environment. So they're providing much more support than what we probably traditionally would have if we were doing this on our own.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. One of the other larger projects is we still have a lot of data on the old colleague ERP system. Student, we brought 95% of it over, but with the financial aid modules, the finance modules, HR and payroll, it was only current active employees at that time. So for reporting purposes and just so we can decommission that old system, that's a huge project to get all that data off and onto some type of central data warehouse. So that's going to be starting up this summer, hopefully. There's a whole bunch of projects. The second thing we discussed was the Cisco wireless lease. That was a 5-year lease that we approved at the board late in 2021. So we had a kickoff meeting last month. Due to the global chip shortage, we're still having inventory issues. Some of that equipment has arrived. It's all expected, barring any further delays, to be arriving in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So what we've been doing in the meantime, there's a lot of prerequisite work, upgrading, the authentication system, network devices. So it really hasn't put us back too far. So with all that equipment coming next month, we'll probably be testing for a month, and then summer we'll have that project completely wrapped up, and this infrastructure from 2012 will be completely replaced in that. Third item was the Suny Print Initiative. This sort of started over a year ago. Suny had all the campuses, all 60 some schools install print monitoring software, and they're really analyzing how much printing every campus is doing. So they used, the huge buying power of Suny and brought all the 60 some schools in and signed a contract with Toshiba. So our print counts and our clip counts are 80% cheaper than what we are currently paying. Each school will have their own contract. They're also sort of but recommending that we reduce devices. Obviously, just as student population has decreased, we have not reduced our printing infrastructure in that same capacity. So, we've made great strides in the past 5 years, but SUNY's really pushing for additional, reduction, which is also going to save monthly costs.
But aren't our copiers and things of that nature, aren't they under lease agreements?
So we have 71 large copiers, MFPs, spread across the 3 campuses. Those were on a 5-year lease, which since expired.
Okay.
So right now we're in a month-to-month contract. Toshiba proposed several different models of devices to replace those. With the pandemic the past several years and sort of where they were placed around the college, the usage of those have been, drastically lower than what they're capable of. So we've talked with Toshiba, and we modeled out the price of purchasing new replacement devices, or they gave us the option of purchasing those devices off the lease at a substantial discount.
But we won't replace all 71, will we?
No, so the price that we're going to buy those back at, we'll probably recoup that money, break even in about 7 months from what we were paying month to month.
But how many devices are we talking about?
Yeah. So we're going to purchase all of them. We're going to keep a couple as spares, backups. Probably 3 or 4. One per campus, and then we're going to still use those to put them in a central location, and then pull back 5 or 6 other smaller devices. So with Toshiba, part of this, they're coming in, they're going to do a full site assessment of every single room at every campus, where the current devices are located, where the staff and the students are located, and they give us a complete final desired state with they're estimating a 50% reduction in devices, which will equate to 50% reduction in costs as well, ongoing maintenance and purchasing of new devices. So that's happening. And then the last item, Dr. Balkan had asked me to look at a possible ERP change over to Banner. I know we just moved to Workday the past 5 years, what we worked on, but we are still one of the outliers using a different system than the rest of the SUNY schools. So we had an initial talk with the SUNY Cisco Center out of Oneonta, and they sort of support the day-to-day operations of not all, but most of the Banner schools, and then SUNY iTech, which is where all the hosting of the servers and the infrastructure happens. So that was just an initial conversation. We're having another discussion tomorrow with Aleutian about their actual offering. I know last time we picked an ERP, that took 12 to 14 months to make a decision. So there's a lot of investigation, discovery, architecture on what a Banner ERP would, mean for the college. The actual software licensing is included at no cost for all the SUNY schools, so that'd be no cost. But we still would be responsible for those CCAS fees, the hosting fees. There's additional product modules that are not included, such as recruitment, data warehousing, reporting. So they just gave us very rough numbers on what a Banner migration would cost. So annual costs were about $450,000 just for the SUNY portion. The timeline for the student implementation would be 2 to 3 years at about 2.5 million. Another 2 years for payroll, finance, HCM, about another 1.5 million for that implementation. We'd still have, we have 250 integrations to third-party systems right now with Workday. So Erie would be on the, responsible for making that migration. Now CCAS does deliver a lot of those integrations that we have, mostly for serious reporting and a lot of common applications like Brightspace. They would sort of take care of all that work for us, but we would still be responsible for that additional work. And then we'd still have additional consulting with Workday, sort of, how to unwind all the Workday portions as we cut over to a banner system and, just data migration. So those are, sort of the budgetary numbers, and then, we still need personnel as well. They'd recommend backfilling all our current operations, not only in ITS, but all the functional units, admissions, financial aid, reg, all those units. While they're maintaining operations daily with Workday, we need additional staffing to sort of do that migration. So what we really recommended and what Suny had recommended was just, start going down the path of what we're doing tomorrow is initial investigation, and then, start a full assessment of, what are our requirements, again, sort of that RFP process. What does Banner have that is not offered in Workday? What does Workday have that's not offered in Banner? Just to get a true sense of what another ERP conversion would be. And then we could get costing, see if we're gonna, what the potential savings would be. And not just, dollars, but operational costs for personnel in each department. What is manual process now that could be automated with a different system. So hopefully another month or two we can get an update and see where that possibly could go.
Thank you, Scott.
Sure.
Anything else, Trustee Phillips?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you.
it's a lot happening. Okay.
Thanks, Scott.
Marketing.
Yes, well, I think we're about to start a new era in the marketing committee. I started this marketing committee when I first came on the board. I never thought the campus had really focused on marketing to the degree it should. Happy to hear that Dr. Vulcan is going to take over this committee and give it the emphasis and the focus that it needs. Happy to stay on that committee and serve with you. And just hope it starts a whole new era in how we market and bring to the attention of this community what we have here. And I think with our new executive team in place, I really do think it's a new era for the campus. And it's a whole new start. So I'm looking forward to that.
It's kind of a random thing, but it's on topic. I was in a conversation the other day with, I think it was a family member, who said, made the point that I made earlier about how many people they knew from Suny Erie who were just in fantastic positions of responsibility around the community. And she said, but the thing is, you really just don't hear about them. And I'm thinking of almost and this is for the committee discussion, not really at the board level, but think about, let's take our top 200 success stories and show them to the community in some way. And I don't know, I'm an old guy, so TV commercial, but social media, make sure that students and families understand that people who started at Suny Erie wound up in really significant positions around our community in all types of industries.
Well, similar to the, Power 250. I would love
that
to do
type of
something
thing.
very
Yes,
similar.
exactly, Dave.
Just highlighting, this is the breadth of
And not only
impact
would
we've had.
it make the point that you can go here and go anywhere, as we've said, and lead to a good career, but it would create some networking opportunities. And for the people who are listed, it would remind them of their connection to Suny Erie, and hopefully inculcate in them a feeling of responsibility to help us back out, refer people to us, etc. So I think that's a network. Let's call it our 250. Whoever the most prominent ones are. Let's look at that and see what kind of use can be made of that.
I think it starts with the culture. There's no doubt we should advertise and promote the people that have risen from here. But I think it starts with the culture. If you look at recent free agency with the Buffalo Bills. So many of the people, including Von Miller, who left the Super Bowl city and a Super Bowl team to come to Buffalo, what they talked about was that they want to be part of what's going on in Buffalo with this culture that the leadership and the management have built. And it's creating excitement and something special going on here. And I think something special is about to begin here. And it's just a new day, and I think it gives us an opportunity to reintroduce ourselves to the community, bringing forth things that have not been highlighted in the past. So I'm excited about this. I'll be here on the 6th, ready to go, and then we'll go from there.
So along these lines, I mean, part of the marketing is tied to our strategy moving forward of engaging with industry sectors in a completely different way than we've historically done. And you may have seen, some of the initial press releases were collaborating with automotive players, West Her and, but at the end of the day, Northtown. The focus here isn't on just CTE programs. We have the opportunity to do something similar in healthcare, banking, and finance. I mean, across the board. And we're in really a great position, frankly. I've met with quite a few companies, a lot of CEOs in the past 4 or 5 weeks, and 201, they all want to collaborate with Suny Erie, and they all want to do something different than we've historically done. They all recognize that the college has to change in a lot of respects, especially along the lines of micro-credentials, stackable credentials, recognizing that they have to invest in their people. So again, it aligns exactly with what we need to do as far as ensuring that our students are getting hands-on experience while they're going to school. I think as you look at what's happened after the pandemic or through the pandemic, there's been kind of a realization that a lot of the employers who had historically required people with master's or bachelor's degrees had to make do with people that didn't have those degrees, and they were okay. They were able to figure it out. And part of the reason was they kind of focused on people who had demonstrated competencies. So, moving forward, obviously we're going to continue to grow our great transfer capability, but I think the opportunity to engage with industry players and lead partners to basically show a model whereby you can start with stackable credentials, get to a degree, and then transfer, to a 4-year program is the stepping stones that we really have to develop more fully. And when we talk about revenue, the idea of being able to possibly offer even non-credit courses for revenue that will enhance the utilization of our staff and faculty, but also ultimately and ideally be crosswalk back to 4-credit opportunities, right? So they take something and although they might start out, once they're certified in it, we could basically assess and say, okay, you get 3 credit hours for this course, 4 for this, whatever it might be, right? But again, I think this speaks to kind of the redefinition of what we are moving forward. We can't do business as usual. We can't continue to do the Me Too stuff we've done before. And frankly, with the number of industry players that are really excited about the prospect of leveraging Suny Erie to help with their existing workforce, let alone identifying new traditional students effectively that could be moving into their arena, I think our potential is literally unlimited.
Madam Chair, I have an appointment at noon, so
Thank
I
you.
have to leave as we discussed. My apologies, but I think we're close.
Yep, we're close. We're close. Thank you, Trustee Stone. So, regarding the report of the chair, in the interest of time, I just want to mention to my fellow trustees that I will be taking over the board orientation platform and working with some college staff and Kelly to create a landing place for information and things for new trustees, as we still have a few vacancies left, as well as a place where all trustees can go to get information regarding, studies, reports, and things presentations that are shown to us. So that is coming up. I will leave my board report there, my chair report there, and I'll hand it over to you, Dr. Boken, for the president's report.
So, again, at a high level, what I wanted to kind of focus on was just this dynamic that we have to implement across the board. And as you're probably aware, we're working much more closely with the press to highlight what our strategy is and to try to demonstrate that it is a replicable strategy. Over the next several months, I think you'll see more announcements coming from the healthcare space, from the advanced manufacturing space. And one of the things that is critical to it, frankly, is a rethinking of how we define and develop the faculty that are supporting our programs. Obviously we've got more faculty than we, can afford at the current time. But the key here is ensuring that our faculty are over the spots that are required by our local industry partners. And to that end, we do have the opportunity to collaborate with many that have actually brought training inside their companies who are now willing to say, look, if you can figure out how to do it, we'd love to transfer resources to you, maybe even pay for them, but with the prospect of being able to grow the total number of candidates, for our open positions. So again, it's kind of a tweak to the model. It's something that obviously we have to work with, with the Faculty Federation. But when you're trying to figure out how to grow enrollment, how to improve and grow our FTE, how to reduce our costs, and you've got industry partners that are raising their hands saying, we're here to help you, we've got to figure out how to be creative and take advantage of this to the fullest. In thinking about the marketing component alone, quite frankly, one of our challenges historically has been we haven't standardized a lot of processes for each of the programs, any of the functions. And as a result, some of the stuff that I'm working with Paula Sandy on is, again, coming up with a standard program of study template, for example, that all the programs can use that describe exactly when they should take courses, has background information on the program, but on the backside also talks about the opportunity, starting salaries. So it's more of a marketing tool than just, this is my, my schedule of classes. And I think that's a critical component of us being able to sell this idea that we're more than, what we've historically been. I think oftentimes people are starting programs without an appreciation for what the end game is, and shame on us for not explaining to them exactly what the value of a program is and what they can expect when they graduate. Additionally, those programs of study are things that should be reviewed and blessed by our advisory committees, so that they're basically saying, yeah, verily, these are in lockstep with exactly the type of skill sets and people we're looking to hire for those who are interested in graduating and going directly into the workforce with their certificate or associate's degree. Additionally, we're having discussions with the local four-year schools about trying to figure out how best to position us for greater success. Specifically, we're working with Buff State and the Aspen Institute to try to figure out how to grow retention. We have about 500 students that transfer to Buff State, and although our retention is higher by about 11 or 12 points than traditional students who start at Buff State, primarily because we have probably more mature students who've really decided, hey, I've got to get the four-year degree, and that they understand the importance of buckling down. We do see significant opportunity to enhance that retention by, again, collaborating more fully with industry partners. Across the board, the things that's changed, and we've got to just kind of recognize, is that with low unemployment, students are going to be wooed away by the opportunity to earn income or to get benefits. And we've got to figure out how to structure engagements with industry sectors that enable them to go to school part-time or full-time and work part-time, but enable them to be successful and contribute to their family income. Overall, I do have to say, the team has been really bending over backwards trying to figure out how to get us from where we are to where we need to be. And, you know, there's some people I definitely need to thank. You know, Scott Ermer, you just heard his report and the breadth of opportunities and challenges that are on his plate. He's doing a fantastic job. I'll tell you, you know, Adiam, our provost, Dr. Sagai, has been diligent working with Kathy Colesto to try to help us, again, refine exactly what our offerings need to be going forward so we get the best return on our investment. You know, working with Maureen and Andy Sacco, and Rich Kanazi, Cindy Dill, the unions. Obviously, this is an all-in effort. I mean, if we're not all in lockstep, we're going to struggle. And frankly, we have, you know, with a $9 million deficit in front of us, an opportunity to do something impactful and important quickly. And I believe we need to do that. And I'm, you know, hopeful that we'll come to consensus on how best to do that moving forward in short order.
Thank you, Dr. Holcomb. Any questions from our skeleton crew that remains? Okay. Travis is left. There's no student trustee report. College Senate. Colleen.
I'm quick today. So I'll just stand. It'll take me too much time to sit and get back up. So hello, welcome to Suny Erie for the board. I'm Colleen Quinn. I'm our College Senate chair, and our College Senate is our central governance body at the college. It's made up of faculty, administration, senior executive staff, and students, and we all work together to help with academic policies and endeavors at the college. So we met at the beginning of March, and now it's the end of March, and a whole lot has happened since then. So what the College Senate is focusing on moving forward is we have a Senate executive team meeting on Tuesday, and we're going to be working with our South Campus faculty and staff and with the new initiatives of with the programs and things with the teach out and how we can best support the college and our fellow employees together. We are also working with the distance learning department with Pat Ryan for the Brightspace conversion. So myself, Erica Hendra, who's our vice chair, and Dave Uzinski and Dr. Jason Steinitz, who are also on our our College Senate executive team, are all working in the pilot. We're all piloting Brightspace this summer, and we are helping develop and fine tune any of the training and things like that. And we'll also be part of the training. The trainer will be the trainers of the others and helping, and we'll be doing, moving forward into the fall semester, some sort of sandboxes and things to help faculty get their courses. They'll already be up and running, as Scott had mentioned, for the fall on Brightspace, but we'll be working with other faculty to make sure that everybody's comfortable and making their courses be the best that they could be. And that's all I have today. And I'm gonna scoop myself because I gotta pick my parents up from the airport. So
Okay. Thank you,
it's great to see everybody.
All right. Is there any old business? Any new business? Executive session we had this morning. Schedule of the next month's meeting. The next meeting of Suny Erie Board of Trustees is a joint meeting with Ecc Foundation. I love those meetings. On April 28th, 2022 at North Campus, 9 a.m. You also have the dates of your committee meetings should have been sent to you. And with that being said, may I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
We all must be in favor. Hearing none. I'll adjourn this meeting at 11:54. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
I was in front of